Hey folks, Jimmy here, aka Palette of the Dead. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the latest issue of Warhammer 40k Combat Patrol magazine. Now, as per usual with all these videos, if you like them, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and of course, drop me a comment down below. I really do love hearing back from you guys. It goes a massive way to helping out the channel too. Now, this week we are on issue 10 of Combat Patrol magazine. It is a time for us to get a mini, and we also get a paintbrush. So, first talking about the paintbrush, and I'll try not to bore you too much with this. This is the Citadel Colour Medium Paint Base Brush. This is a synthetic brush, so what synthetic brushes means, and they'll generally be white, they have synthetic fibres for the bristles of the brush. Synthetic fibres are generally kind of plasticky, so not all synthetic brushes are the same. I have had some synthetic brushes that are absolutely terrible. The Citadel ones aren't too bad, in all honesty. They're better than the average, and it will do you fine. It has a slightly flatter tip. That is due to the fact that it is a base brush, so it is designed to give you as much coverage as possible over a wider surface area. Otherwise, with your average standard brush, you're gonna be loading the brush up and going over and going over and going over, and it'll take you a lot longer to paint it. You can get bigger brushes in this, so if you want a wider brush, which will give you better coverage over and speed up your basing especially, you can do it. You can use these a little bit like dry brushes if you wanted to. I wouldn't recommend it too much because the bristles are a little bit shorter, and you've got more chance of actually knackering the brush. If you do think that you might want to use it as a dry brush, in all honesty, I would stop. Tell you to go on to Amazon, buy yourself some really cheap makeup brushes, which sounds like a bit of a joke. However, they are far better for dry brushing. So you can get a bit of a decent paint coverage, and the bristles are nice and soft. Obviously, you just don't really get to use them as detail brushes because they're a bit too fat and chunky. Anyway, talking about chunky, here we have the Space Marine Librarian in Terminator armour. So the Terminator armour obviously being that chunkier armour that some Space Marines inhabit. Really cool. I do really like this mini. I like the fact he's carrying a big axe. He looks pretty badass. He's got some psychic abilities. He has some bolters on his wrist. Yeah, pretty cool. Really cool. It's not as many parts as you probably would think for this type of mini. It has some nice intricate detail, like on the knee pads, well, shin pads and such like, and even on the knees, and a few extra places as well. So a really good mini to have. One that I must admit I am looking forward to getting to, although it will go towards the back of my painting pile because I have hundreds of minis to paint, which yeah, I don't have the time for. Anyway, going into the issue, first off, we are greeted by our how to build section. It is relatively straightforward. With most minis like this, I would recommend painting the head separate from the body. In this case, if you try to do that the way that it builds up, you put the head in first and then you put the chest piece on, it would be very difficult to get the head in place. So I'm not going to recommend that because it will be an absolute nightmare. Paint it all in one go because it'll be a little bit easier. But yeah, it is the way it is. But otherwise, a super cool unit. I must admit, I really like it. I think it's really cool. The only thing that could do him better is if he had a cloak. But you don't always need a cloak for every mini. Anyway, carrying on. We move on to our paint section. Painting, generally very easy. Obviously, you're going to paint it very similar to how you've painted other Space Marines. So if you've already painted your Captain in Terminator armour and your Infernus Marines, paint it in a very similar way. So if you're following the guide, you're going to be using your McCrag Blue, Baron Black, Retributor Armour and Wraithbone to begin with, and then later on we'll be adding more colour to it with, say for instance, Lead Belcher, probably a little bit of Corax White, maybe some Stormhost Silver, maybe some Corn Red or something like that, or Mephiston Red, Norn Oil and such like that will come into play. If you want to take it a step further and change it up a little bit, obviously you can go with Barrett and Burgundy on things like the haft of the weapon, You can start painting other colours into it if you really wanted to. It is entirely up to you. You may want to do some nice bright vibrant blue for all that intricate bits. You're going to need to use it like a bit of a wash though, and then go back over it with Macragge blue to kind of bring it back. But otherwise, a super cool colour scheme. It does work very, very well. It's very simple to use and follow, and yeah, it's your choice of how you want to go about doing it. Moving on though, we have a read section, so giving us more background detail into the Imperium of Man. However, I'm not going to lie to you, I am not going to try and pronounce that word, because I tried it with good old Imperium magazine, butchered it like hell. Real pain in the backside to actually do. So I am not going to try and say it. But otherwise, essentially, in the madness of the 41st millennium, blind, zealous faith is a vital force for holding humanity together. For untold billions, belief in the Emperor and his power is the only thing that keeps them from utter despair, instead filling them with righteous hatred. So, while the Imperium relies on military might and brutal repression to keep its population in line, it is faith in the Emperor that truly drives the majority of Imperial citizens. Warriors charge into battle screaming his name, while workers on countless worlds break up their seemingly endless shifts with prayers to the God Emperor. Indeed, the divine power of the Emperor can even manifest itself in miracles that protect the faithful or imbue their weapons with mysterious power. So as you can tell, essentially, the Emperor is seen as a god because he's an immortal, or very, very close to being immortal. He is seen as a deity and everything like that, and he is now very, very followed, and essentially, you know, it's a religion, and the humans of the 41st millennium are all following that one religion. It's essentially a cult. How else can I describe it? I don't really know. It's Scientology. In some ways, it's every religion rolled into one. Essentially, that is basically the way of seeing it. It's every religion and cult rolled into one single faith that everybody follows. Obviously, there are people who do not follow it, and they are essentially your blasphemers and your followers of the chaos gods and such like. But generally, most people follow the Emperor. Moving on, obviously there are shrines dedicated to the Emperor all over the place, so the Imperial cult can be found in every part of the Imperium. These depict the Emperor, Space Marines, or other figures of worship such as Celestine, the Living Saint, and many, many more. And they can be all over the place. And you can buy things like parts of the buildings and such like that to make them if you wanted to as well, if you want some scenery later on. And obviously the cult it's a cult. You can't deny it. The cult Imperialis is a cult. It's the Imperial cult that has spread and maintained a vast network of preachers and missionaries, some of them fighting alongside the Astra Militarum, others just keeping up the zeal of their fellow warriors and such like. So some of them kind of just travel far and wide, trying to spread the word of the Emperor. So essentially, it's religion. It's a cult. Anyway, moving on. Enough talk about cults. We get more information about how Space Marines work. So Space Marines utilise different doctrines. So the combat doctrines are the three pillars which Space Marine strategy rests. Well, every commander varies their use of these doctrines. All use them in some form or another, often opening with the Devastator doctrine. So, the Space Marines are well known for changing their strategy to adapt to the flow of battle. These shifts in tactics are known as doctrines. The Devastator doctrine is straightforward, effective, and terrifying for Space Marines' enemies to behold. When using the Devastator doctrine, a Space Marine force will attempt to break their foe at long range with devastating fusillades of fire. So, if you're going to be using the Devastator Doctrine, you may want to consider bringing in more firepower. So you may want some of the heavier armoured Space Marines that you can pick up and get from like GW or your local kind of third-party retailer. And yeah, you get some that are pretty cool. You get some that have some, like the Desolators, which have some big massive guns, which look comically big compared to the actual Space Marine. And the Space Marines have gotten bigger over the years as well, and the weapons look a bit cheesy, but they look pretty cool. You can also adapt them with different weapons and vehicles. Vehicles are always really cool in 40k, so you can have things like the Brutalis Dreadnought, which you get if you've got the premium edition of this magazine. You can get a Storm Talon gunship as well as others, and you can also get the tanks like the Repulsor Executioner here, which is pretty cool. And I do genuinely like Space Marine tanks. They look cool, they're a little bit more fun, and anything with a tank, genuinely like them. And you're gonna be really annoyed when I talk about Leagues of Votan when they come into this magazine, because I really like their vehicles. Anyway, moving on. Librarian in Terminator armor. Librarians combine the physical might of a veteran Space Marine with the strange psychic powers. By channeling the raw power of warp, a librarian devastates enemies with crackling waves of magical lightning. Librarians are both respected for their talents and for their guardianship of the chapter's lore. So, librarian, obviously a warrior, but also a mage, essentially, as well. So, space wizards. Obviously, on this page, you can do your usual. You can give them a name. Turning over the page, though, you get the data sheet. So, obviously, we already have the data card that we got earlier in the run with all the others, or most of the others for this section. Which gives you all your stats. So you don't need to keep the data sheet if you don't want to. Obviously, they do have some abilities though. So they do have a force weapon, which is their psychic ability. They also have a pretty damn cool axe, which can smite enemies and such like that, which is really cool. And they do have a couple of other abilities as well. So definitely worth having a read into. Definitely worth checking out. If you're going to be a Space Marine player, Librarian's pretty cool. And definitely worth having and taking on there. But yeah, really good stuff. Moving on, we get more of our basic rules, all to do with weapon ability. So this is explaining how the different weapons do different things. So you do have certain terms. So when you're looking at things like your good old data sheet, you'll see these key words. So infantry, character, psyker, imperium, terminator, librarian, for instance. So they have those keywords. So some weapons involve certain keywords. So for instance, like the pistol has a pistol keyword. So for instance, our librarian in Terminator armor does not carry a pistol with him, so as it's not mentioned here. They also do not have the ability, there is things like the ability to do rapid fire, which is always in the brackets there. So for instance, the Stormbolter there, which it's not a pistol, but it's attached to the wrist and it's small firearm, but it's not a sidearm. But yeah, really cool stuff. Moving on from that though, obviously you get different weapon types. So things like blasts. So things like your barb gaunts have a blast keyword in their range weapons. So they kind of work as like an explosive. So it does more damage it can damage more from one shot and such like that. Torrent as well, so the Infernus Marines, for instance, will do more because of the way flames work. It kind of spreads out, so it's more of a torrent of attack power. Heavy as well, so heavy weapons, such like, fairly straightforward. Devastating wounds, so some wounds can cause devastating wounds, which can be fatal in near enough one go, and psychic and such like that. So psychers have the psychic keyword, so they have different psychic abilities and such like. Then you have your assault units, things like the termagants as well, which will have mostly assault as part of their keywords. And then hazardous. So a lot of them can have different things. So it's worth reading into and having a good work out to what each keyword means. And there are more later on. So moving on to our scenario though, mind over matter. So with this, you are literally taking your librarian on a solo killing spree. So, your librarian in Terminator armor going up against Von Ryan's Lepus, Wing Tyrannid Prime, and your 10 Termagants. So, pretty good stuff. So, if you're playing through this and you are lucky enough to essentially smash the hell out of Von Ryan's Lepus, you are going to then want to turn your attention to, for instance, either of the others. So you do get to do move, shoot, and charge through all of this. Have a bit of fun with it. Obviously, try it. If you enjoy it and you win, change sides. Try the other side. Have a bit of fun with all of it. But yeah, really cool stuff. And obviously, the more of these little kind of step-by-step guides that you're going through for good old games will teach you how to play the game more and more over time. Then moving on to our final bit, as per usual, having a look at what's coming next week. So next week is a paint issue. Nothing super fantastic. We get 2 paints. We get Lead Belcher, which is really good. It's a very good, strong, darker metallic. Pretty damn cool. I use quite a bit of it, in all honesty. And Corax White. Corax White, I don't use super huge amounts. You are going to want to use it in certain areas, like the kind of undercloak on the Captain in Terminator armor that we got earlier on. You're going to want to use it on probably the Eldari later on when we get them, and more. So it will come in handy. Because it's white though, it's a heavy pigment, so it separates very easily. So you're going to need to shake the hell out of it before you even start using it. Then issue 12 and issue 13 is parts 1 and 2 of the Space Marine Terminators. Now obviously these are the Terminator armoured Space Marines. They're a bit chunkier, a bit heavier, and a bit tougher than your other Space Marines. But otherwise, really cool. If you're going to be a Space Marines player, you may want to pick up extra of these issues to try and save yourself some money as compared to buying extra units from GW or even your third-party retailer. But yeah, otherwise, super cool. I'm quite looking forward to the Terminators. I do really like them. Not that I'll get a chance to paint them anytime soon, but they are really cool. And eventually I will get around to them. But otherwise, we have some really good stuff still to look forward to. We've got more Termagants to come. We've got the Psychophage. We've got the Parasite of Mortrex. We have the Chaplain on bike. And we also have 1 or 2 other little bits and pieces. And then obviously, after that, we'll move into the next phase, essentially, of the magazine, which will come with some really cool stuff as well. From the looks of it, Chaos and Eldari, from the looks of it anyway, if you're using the premium magazine as a kind of a guide to what might be coming with what. Anyway, that is enough rambling on from me. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you sometime soon. Bye bye then.